Hello there, I'm Randy Skretvedt. I'm the author of Laurel and Hardy, The Magic Behind the Movies, and we are watching Your Darn Tootin', which is an enthusiastic affirmative that dates to at least 1908. That means you're darn right. Evidently, it was a little too American for British audiences because in England it was retitled The Music Blasters, which may have been the working title. The direction is credited to Edgar Kennedy, not E. Livingston Kennedy as it was with From Soup to Nuts. Now, this idea arose from one of the gag men seeing a band concert, probably where this was shot, which was at the band shell at Exposition Park in Los Angeles. Now, the park is still there, but not the band shell. Otto Lederer is the conductor, and he is probably best known as the comedy relief in The Jazz Singer with Al Jolson, where he plays Moishe Yudelson. This is his only film for Hal Roach, although he had worked with Babe Hardy in the Larry Seaman films The Gown Shop and The Wizard of Oz. He was born in Prague, Austria-Hungary on April 17, 1886, and died at 79 in Woodland Hills on September 3, 1965. Woodland Hills, California, being the city where the motion picture home is located. He acted in about 130 films from 1912 through 1933, and he was very busy in the teens. When he was 47 in 1933, he left acting to become a makeup artist, and he worked uncredited with Jack Pierce at Universal on The Old Dark House, Bride of Frankenstein, The Raven, Tower of London, and other films through the early 1950s. Now, you're going to see several familiar faces as part of the other band members. You're going to see Wilson Benge on Stan's right or our left. And he usually played butlers, as we saw him do briefly in Do Detectives Think. He was the top-hatted mayor in the Battle of the Century. Born March 1st, 1875 in London, he died at 80 years old in Hollywood on July 1st, 1955. And he made, there's Wilson Benge on the left. And he made 6 films at the Roach Studio, the last one being Scram, where he played Hawkins, once again a butler. His very first film was the 1922 Douglas Fairbanks film Robin Hood, as Prince John's henchman, and his second film was The Ten Commandments as a butler. He's in about 208 films, 96 of them as a butler. You're also going to see at one point a trombonist behind Stan, and that's a guy named Clarence Morehouse, who did just about everything in the movie business from 1918 through the early 60s. He was an assistant director, he was a gag man, an actor, an extra, was also the agent or front man, as Charlie Gomorrah liked to call him. He was the agent for Gorilla Man Supreme Charles Gomorrah, who we remember from The Chimp and from Swiss Miss. There's also a guy named Bob Minford, who is the mustached clarinetist behind Ollie, and he is in 36 Roach films, 10 of them with Laurel and Hardy, between 1927 and 1934. Born in Lincoln, Nebraska on March 27th of 1895, died in Sacramento County, California at 64 on September 21st, 1959, and had at least one jail term, I'm sorry to say. Now, it took the Laurel and Hardy crew 10 days to shoot this film. It was not shot quite in sequence. The first 3 days, January 17th through 19th, were spent at the band shell of Exposition Park in Los Angeles, which was about 8 miles east of the Hal Roach Studios. The company then moved to the New York street of the Hal Roach Studio backlot, where they shot the manhole gags and other outdoor scenes on January 20th and 21st. They took a day off on the 22nd and came back to film more outdoor scenes, including the pants-ripping Maelstrom from the 23rd through the 25th. And the final 2 days of shooting were the 26th and 27th of January. They were spent on a Hal Roach stage shooting the boarding house sequence. You're going to see in a moment W.C. Palla on some sheet music. And in case you were wondering, William Conrad Palla was a novelty pianist, best known for composing a tune called Dancing Tambourine. And he also did arrangements for another W.C., that would be William Christopher Handy, which makes us wonder if it isn't St. Louis Blues that the band is supposed to be playing. Now, Stan is unusually devious here when his music gets blown away because he takes Ollie's music and he tells him that his music is under the foot of the conductor. Stan is a bit more aggressive in this film than we would remember in later Laurel and Hardy films, and just as this film was being made, The Battle of the Century was going into release, and not too long after, Leave 'Em Laughing, both of which have lengthy scenes where Laurel and Hardy cause a lot of problems for the entire neighborhood. By the way, those two stock shots, those shots of the audience, I'm sure that's stock footage, maybe even newsreel footage, because I can't imagine Hal Roach paying all of those people $5 each for a couple of brief shots, which in total last less than 1 second. Although we do see them at the very beginning. Anyway, we will see Stan being a little more assertive and aggressive in these early films. And remember that Laurel and Hardy at this point had been a team for maybe, about 8 months? So it is rather astonishing how close to fully formed they are here. Ollie really seems to be entirely in character, as Stan still has a little ways to go to become the meek character that we remember from the films of 1930 onward. And there is W.C. Paula, as I told you about him. And once again, Laurel and Hardy get into a little tiff, and it spreads just as it did with the pie fight and as it did with the traffic jam. Now we are at the boarding house, and we are going to see Agnes Steele as the landlady. She was born in Melbourne, Australia on August 22nd, 1881, and she played uncredited small parts in movies from the early 1920s until soon before her death on March 3rd of 1949. And one of her best roles was in a 1926 feature called My Old Dutch, which is based on a song made famous by an English music hall comedian named Albert Chevalier. Now, Edgar Kennedy was in that film, and he might well have brought her to this movie because she has no other known credits at the Hal Roach lot. You're also soon going to see a little boy, Monty O'Grady, real name John Montgomery O'Grady, born March 6, 1916 in Los Angeles, so he was just about to turn 12 years old when you see him here. And he's only in one other Hal Roach film, which is a 1924 Our Gang comedy called Every Man for Himself. He's in about 17 films from 1924 to 1929, including Mary Pickford's film Sparrows, and he left movies for 10 years, presumably to go to junior high, high school, and college, returned to movies in 1939 at the age of 23, and resumed a busy career as an extra, often as a nightclub patron or a party guest, working until 1995 in more than 467 films. He died 2 days after his 84th birthday on March 8, 2000 in Woodland Hills. Now notice how Ollie is preoccupied, first with the landlady's note, while Stan unscrews the top of the salt shaker. Then he's preoccupied again with putting bread into his soup while Stan does the same to the pepper, and he keeps Stan from doing the same to the ketchup. And there's Monty O'Grady. We don't know who the other boarders are. Unfortunately, the Hal Roach studio was not good about providing detailed credits at the beginnings of the films for all of the supporting actors. And when you go through the payroll ledgers, usually for any given week, anybody that was not a contract actor, and it's just about everybody, is on one single page that says extras. And even though they're more than extras, they're just all put there. There's no indication as to what film they worked on. So it makes it a little bit difficult to figure out who these bit players are. Now, the studio is still providing separate negatives for domestic and overseas distribution, shot side by two cameras. And right here, there are some significant differences in various prints of Your Darn Tootin'. Now, you saw how Agnes Steele was raising her hand there. In the print that I had in 1968, she wiggles her index fingers at the boys and she mouths, "Come here," as she's about to evict them. And there she just registered a shock. So now the boys have lost their jobs and now they've lost their home. This is a steady downward spiral in this film. And this title about Sister McPherson seems to be a reference to evangelist Amy Semple McPherson, a very flamboyant and prominent preacher in Los Angeles in the 1920s. Now, you're going to see the beginning of this scene. It's in a single take that lasts 50 seconds, and their interplay is really wonderful here. Now, again, they've only been a team for about 7 months here, but they have rapport as if they had worked together for years. Stan, once again, is wearing the pinstriped suit that he wore in Do Detectives Think, and that is really the first film where Laurel and Hardy wear the costumes that we associate with them. I don't know, maybe Stan thought that was a lucky suit or something, because he continued to wear it for the next 6 years until 1934, And as it got progressively shabbier, he would use it only for films in which Laurel and Hardy were supposed to be in dire straits financially. Now, the other characters in this film, practically everybody, is really nasty to Laurel and Hardy. The guy puts his cigarette when Ollie puts his hat out hoping to get some money. Now, this one's even worse. She crumples Ollie's hat and laughs at it. A lot of very cruel people in this film, but that sort of intensifies Laurel and Hardy's relationship. I always like this film because it's not just a funny film with a lot of great visual humor. It says something about Stan and Ollie's difficult friendship. Now, that cop, by the way, is Kristen J. Frank. And he's only in 3 films for Hal Roach. This is the only one with Laurel and Hardy. He was married to Charlotte Minot, whom we saw prominently in Love 'Em and Weep and Sugar Daddies. He was born March 13, 1890 in New York City and died at 77 on December 10, 1967 in Hollywood. He's in 76 known films from 1920 through 1948. Now, this whole sequence was shot on the Hal Roach Studios backlot, all over the backlot. And it has so many different locations. If you go to lordheath.com and click on the sunshine icon for extras, it'll take you to the Hal Roach Backlot virtual tour created by Jim DeLappy and Robert A. Winslow, and that will show you all the different locations. Now, that's Rolf Sedan as the friendly drunk. And despite Prohibition, there were still lots of drunks in comedy films. He's the one person in this movie who is friendly to Laurel and Hardy. Born on January 20th, 1896 in New York City, he was a student of scientific agriculture before going on the stage. He made his first of more than 300 films in 1921. He worked in 31 Hal Roach films, 4 with Laurel and Hardy, most memorably as a hotel desk clerk in Double Whoopee. He was a fine dialectician and worked often on radio with Jack Benny. He also played the postman Mr. Beasley on the Burns and Allen TV show and many characters on a children's show called Andy's Gang. And a memorable later credit for Rolf Sedan is as a train conductor in the Mel Brooks film Young Frankenstein. He died of a heart attack at 86 on September 16, 1982. Now here we once again have Otto Lederer rehearsing for yet another final concert. And Mr. Frank comes back into view because he thinks that Laurel and Hardy really ought to have a license before they're peddling their musical wares on the street. And unfortunately, he becomes the unfortunate target of Otto Lederer's wrath. Now, we have a tracking shot here. As with Edgar Kennedy's other directorial effort with From Soup to Nuts, and we have tracking shots ahead of Stan and Ollie as they fall into manholes. There's really no other way to shoot this, and it works very, very well. Also, there's a different cameraman than usual on this film, and again, it's not George Stevens, who was shooting most of their films at this time. The chief cameraman here is Floyd Jackman, who was born in Columbia, Iowa in 1885. Now, his older brother Fred was a very busy cameraman for Mack Sennett in the late teens, and before long, Floyd joined him there. And after shooting some westerns for Warner Brothers, Floyd came to work at the Roach lot in 1923, where his brother was directing a dramatic feature, Call of the Wild. Floyd photographed many shorts with Charlie Chase, Mabel Normand, and Max Davidson, and had worked with Stan and Babe on Love 'Em and Weep and Call of the Cuckoo. Now, Your Darn Tootin' is his last known film. And evidently for Floyd Jackman, pulling teeth appealed to him more than pulling gags because he left the world of comedy films behind to become a dentist. He had his own private practice by 1930 and died in Los Angeles on November 27, 1962 at the age of 77. Now, this first manhole worker that you're seeing there, that's Jack O'Brien. He will show up again later as one of the street combatants. And he's another one of the Hal Roach people that shows up in several films, sort of unheralded. We see a lot of this part of the backlot from the second 100 years. There's that vent. Hardy is afraid that Stan's going to fall through that. Fortunately, Stan is not wearing kilts as he was standing over a vent and putting pants on Philip. And again, another tracking shot, and one that works very, very well. There's really no other way to do that gag except by using a tracking shot. But that's very rare in Laurel and Hardy comedies. Laurel and Hardy and Keaton and Chaplin, once again, would usually just rather cut to another shot than have the camera move and call attention to itself. But in this case, that's really the only way you can do this gag. Now, you're going to see Chet Brandenburg coming up here in a minute, the man with a blowtorch. There he is. Chet Brandenburg was the man of all work at the Hal Roach Studios. He was an assistant director and a prop man, an occasional bit actor, and he had a brother named Ed Brandenburg, who also worked frequently at the Hal Roach Studios. Now there's George Rowe, born in Los Angeles as Edward Jacob Hellbach on December 6, 1897. He's in about 138 films, 120 of them for Hal Roach. He was very active at the Roach lot from 1919 through 1926 as cross-eyed support to Snub Pollard, Paul Parrott, and Stan Laurel. This is his only Laurel and Hardy film and his last. He worked as a cook in the 1930s and 40s and died at the age of 83 in Southgate, California on November 18, 1981. Well, now Laurel and Hardy have lost their jobs, they've lost their home, and now they're about to lose their means of making a living. And, I've seen this film described as being episodic, but I don't find it episodic at all. I find it a very, very linear in story. I think it's, like I say, it's a downward spiral for Laurel and Hardy. It's basically, how much can Laurel and Hardy lose before there's something that they simply can't lose? What can you strip away from Laurel and Hardy before there's one thing that they'll never lose? And we have a Wurlitzer shop and a Western Union shop, so it looks like an actual street, but it really is still the Hal Roach Studios back lot. Flat, yes, flat in more ways than one. Now, you're about to see some very physical humor in this film, almost more akin to the Three Stooges than Laurel and Hardy, and really more physical toward each other than you would see in any other film. So the punching and kicking, this works in a silent film, but it really would have been painfully realistic in a talkie. I like the musical track and sound effects that were used for it in the golden age of comedy. They used some rather cartoonish sound effects, which took away a lot of the pain associated with this scene. But again, Laurel and Hardy find some creative tit-for-tat retaliations in this film. You're going to see a shot in a moment which exists in two negatives. Now, once again, there was a B negative for overseas prints and an A negative for North America. And it comes when Stan and Ollie have jumped on each other's hats, and Stan reacts. Oh, I like this bit here. You think that Stan is going to tear up Ollie's handkerchief, but instead he simply uses Ollie's for his own. Notice that Stan's tie is gone and Ollie's has been ripped, because in just a moment you're going to see some footage that is duplicated. Evidently, they had to cover something and didn't have the coverage, so they had to repeat a shot. Here, this shot coming up, this shot here, which we're going to go back to. There, in the A negative of this, Stan looks more directly into the camera instead of off to the side as he does there. And that's because this is from the B negative, which was shot right alongside of the A negative. There's the repeated shot. Notice that Stan's tie has suddenly reappeared and Ollie's is now intact again. So it's a little bit grainy, and the boys' ties are intact, but that's providing a little coverage that evidently they didn't have in other footage. Now, you're going to see a lot of extras getting their shins kicked or standing around in the Roach backlot in their BVDs. And remember, this was shot in mid-January, which even in Southern California can be kind of cold. There is Sam Lufkin. And I notice he, just 2 seconds after meeting Stan, he punches him in the stomach. Who are these people? Anyway, an extra by the name of Frank Saputo, who was one of these guys, recalled this to my friend Jordan R. Young, and Frank said, quote, "We worked 2 days on that thing. The pants ripping was probably toward the end of the second day. Truthfully, I don't remember Kennedy directing this one, but the director was on a platform truck with 2 cameras. Then they had a camera over on the far right of this flatiron-shaped building, a camera on the left side of the scene, and one right by the curb. The fellow on the truck directed the whole thing, but he had 2 assistant directors, and one probably being Lloyd French, who would get the people placed and tell them when they should come in. The first kicking would start it all, and we extras would be somewhere around the building. Some of us were off out of the range of the camera, and the director would say, 'Action, start coming in slowly now.' You get in there, Don't go too fast. Don't mob up. Then you walk in, you look, and you start kicking. Now, Edgar Deering is one of the guys who's in this mob. Once again, if you go to lordheath.com, LORDHEATH.com, you will see a wonderful cast listing for this film, and several of these combatants are identified. There's Christian J. Frank again. This poor guy, why did he even walk into this maelstrom? Wouldn't you want to avoid this as much as possible? And Stan now is standing on the sidelines as if he is an innocent bystander. This guy really gets mobbed by everybody. And once again, I don't know why anybody would walk into this, but I guess it works for the purposes of the comedy. I think that's Edgar Deering. Well, maybe not. Well, anyway, it's hard to tell with all of these guys. And now, of course, even the cop is depantsed. Now, what can you take away from Laurel and Hardy? They've lost their home, their jobs, their livelihood, but what remains is their friendship, and they go off together as they will always be together. And this is Randy Skretvet, and I thank you very, very much for listening.